All right, hello and welcome to the July 13th, 2020 regular meeting of the Hillsborough City Planning Commission. We thank you for attending this meeting. Your comments and participation are encouraged. All participants in the meeting will be muted until it is their opportunity to speak. To feedback in the audio, planning commissioners should unmute themselves and turn on their camera to indicate they would like to speak, or raise their hands if they have their cameras on. You can also send the chat to Melissa if you prefer to be recognized that way. Please be sure to state your name at the beginning of your remarks for the benefit of the clerk. There will be an opportunity for members of the public to provide comments. Please click the raise hand button illustrated on the screen. You will be unmuted when it is your turn to speak. Please wait until the chair calls on you to begin speaking. State your name at the beginning of your comments and adhere to the time limits. Members of the public may also ask questions of staff at any time during the meeting by typing them into the questions chat box located at the lower right of the screen. If anyone has any difficulties or is watching via HTV and would like to speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, please call 813-273-3774, extension 359. 813-273-3774, extension 359. For action items, the meeting will be conducted as follows. The agenda will be introduced. Staff will give their presentation with a 15-minute time limit. The applicant will be given the opportunity to make a presentation also with a 15-minute time limit. Following the presentations, members of the public may address the Planning Commission when recognized by the chair. Public comment will then be heard for 3 minutes per person. The applicant will be afforded a 3-minute period for rebuttal or response. Planning commissioners will ask questions, and then public comment will be closed. Then upon a motion, a second, and discussion, a vote will be taken. With that introduction, I will ask Commissioner Dix to lead us in the prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. All rise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dear Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to accept the responsibility of service to the future of our respective cities in the county of Hillsborough County, as well as the county at large. We ask you for your guidance to help us to be good stewards of that responsibility. And we say thank you to you for allowing us to serve and for living in the great country in which we are. Watch over us and help us. It is in your name we pray. Amen. Please join with me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Dix. With that, I would ask for the clerk to please take roll.
Thrower? Bernstein?
Here.
Cardenas? Cardenas? Dickerson? Dickerson? Dix?
John Dix is here, but let the record reflect Mr. Cardenas is here. I think his volume is not coming through.
Okay. Dowdy?
Here.
Green? Green? Joseph?
Here.
Kress? Kress? Moreno?
Here.
Powell?
Here.
Rodriguez?
Here.
You have a quorum, sir.
Thank you. Next item up is the approval of minutes for the following meetings. Regular meeting from June 8th, 2020, public hearing for Tampa plan amendments, June 8th, 2020, and public hearing for county plan amendments, June 8th, 2020. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Commissioner Powell.
I'll second. Commissioner Dowdy.
Second by Commissioner Dowdy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Oh, actually, I guess we're going to do a roll call. Please ask the clerk to do a roll call vote.
Thrower, Bernstein,
Aye.
Cardenas, Cardenas,
He's saying aye, but we can't hear me.
And
Yeah,
he's acknowledging yes.
we do have to have his voice on record for a yes.
we'll get you the phone number to call in, Giovanni.
Dix,
Aye.
Dowdy,
Aye.
Green, Joseph,
Aye.
Kress, Moreno,
Aye.
Powell,
Aye.
and has Cardenas been able to get back on yet?
He is not. He's calling in, but he has not gotten in yet.
Yeah, we are giving him the dial-in number. He should be on shortly.
Okay, did you want me to wait a second before I say the vote number?
No, you can go ahead.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
All right, thank you. All right. The next item up for business, item number 2, is public input, items not scheduled on the agenda. If there is anyone who would like to provide public input, who would like to provide comments on items that are not on the agenda or agenda items that are not for action, please click the raise hand button now. You will be unmuted when it is your turn to speak. Please wait until the chair calls on you to begin speaking. State your name at the beginning of your comments, and you will have 3 minutes. Anyone in the public would like to comment on items not on the agenda?
There are no raised hands in the public at this time.
All right. On to the next item. Item number, intermediate item, election. I will turn it over to our attorney, Tracy, to guide us in our election of officers.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. As I think most of you are aware, Commissioner Thrower has tendered his resignation from the Planning Commission, which opens up an officer's seat for the chairmanship of the commission. And the bylaws require the appointment of a replacement officer for an open position at the next meeting, which is today. So while we won't be able to vote as we have in the past by written ballot, because of the nature of this the nature of this meeting being held virtually, we'll have to do that by roll call. But we do need to replace or fill the vacancy for chair. And I guess I suppose it falls to me, perhaps, Mr. Commissioner Dix.
Well, I was just going to suggest, Tracy, you can tell me if the protocol will be incorrect on this, but normally you hand out those written ballots. And under the circumstances, if it would be acceptable to the chairman and the fellow commissioners, back last fall when Mitch Thrower became our chairman, there were only 3 of us that were on the ballot at that time. And that was Mr. Thrower and, of course, Nigel and myself. And while I think all of us consider that to be an honor to serve as the chairman, Nigel, you've been doing such a fine job, and particularly considering that today you're the only one wearing a coat and a tie, I'd like to nominate Nigel Joseph, if you would, to assume the position of our permanent chairman till we have elections for the entire slate and whatnot. But I'd like to see that happen. You're doing a great job, and I hope it's unanimous and we can reach that point by acclamation. So if it's okay with, if the protocol is okay, Tracy, I'd like to make that in the form of a motion.
I'll second that.
Second.
All right.
Who was the second?
Motion by Commissioner Dix, second by, who was that? Commissioner Dowdy,
Commissioner Dowdy.
right? And I guess I will open the floor up now to discussion from other commissioners. Any comments or questions, discussions from anyone? I don't see any hands raised. No? All right, well then I will close discussion and take a vote on, wait, Commissioner Marino? No, okay, I will close discussion and take a vote on the motion on the floor. Oh, roll call, sorry. Clerk, if you could do the roll call vote.
Bernstein,
Vote yes.
Cardenas,
I vote yes.
Dix,
Yes.
Dowdy,
Yes.
Green, Joseph,
Yes.
Kress, Moreno,
Yes.
Powell.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
All right, thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Do we,
Thank you.
Congratulations, Mr. Chair. Now I think we have an open office in the seat of vice chair.
yes.
I'll turn it over back over to you.
All right. I don't know, I've opened the floor to nominations, motions for nominations for vice chair. Commissioner Dowdy?
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Commissioner Powell, Vice Chair.
Have a nomination of Commissioner Powell by Commissioner Dowdy.
I'll second that.
Who's Commissioner Bernstein? Was that you?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right. Should I open it up to any more, or is that,
Any further nominations?
yeah, any further nominations here? No?
I think Commissioner
This-
Powell's got it by acclamation in that case.
Sounds like it. All right. Congratulations, Commissioner Powell.
Thank you.
Congrats.
All right. Was Commissioner Powell's? No. See, is that all? Are we covered now, Tracy? All of our positions filled?
I believe so.
Okay.
I'm hoping to be corrected, but I think so.
All right. Sounds good. All right. On to the next order.
Chairman, did you still want to have a vote on that so we can have it on the record since there was a motion?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Go ahead. You can go ahead and take the roll call vote on the motion on the floor. Good point.
Bernstein,
Yes.
Cardenas,
Yes.
Dix,
Yes.
Dowdy,
Yes.
Green, Joseph,
Yes.
Kress, Moreno,
Yes.
Powell.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Now on to the next item. Item number 3, the presentation of the industrial land study by Jay Collins and staff member Yasir Gonzalez.
Good afternoon, Planning Commission. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jay Collins with Planning Commission staff. It's my screen here with you in just one second. And Mr. Chairman, if you would please tell me when you can see my screen. Mr. Chairman, can you see my screen?
No, I don't see it yet.
Okay, we're going to be switching to Tony's screen because Jay's having technical difficulties.
It would be Yassert's screen.
Still not up just yet.
We can see it now.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, okay, wonderful. I've also attempted to turn the camera on. I'm not sure if the camera is working, so I do apologize for that if you cannot see me.
Yeah, we can't see you, but we can see the screen, the presentation on Yassert's screen.
Yeah.
Oh, it's on the actual screen. All right, wonderful. Well, I'm going through it as well on my screen. So again, this is the industrial lands study that we're working with here today. And this is work that has come out of the Planning Commission now for a little bit over a year that we've been working on this. This began with a couple of different iterations of plan amendments, basically, where we were asked by the Planning Commission to look into industrial lands within Hillsborough County, unincorporated Hillsborough County in its 4 jurisdictions. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background that we will go through because there are a number of new members to the Planning Commission, and we thought it would be best to go back and circle around and basically reintroduce part of this study. Then bring in some of the research ideas that came through the study, which is something that Taylor will work through, as well as some of the, basically, what did we learn in that study? And one such idea that we did learn about are some of the quantitative methods that occur elsewhere in the state of Florida. And one that we would dig into a little bit is the Miami-Dade criteria. And then in a conclusion, we would like to have a conversation with the Planning Commission about what's next for this, if the Planning Commission would like to see us dig a little bit deeper, or if they would like to see us basically wrap this up. I would say that we have transmitted this to the city of Tampa for a little bit of insight from them. All of the jurisdictional representatives at the Planning Commission have reviewed this document. And besides myself and Taylor, Yasser Gonzalez, as well as Jennifer Malone through the CPR team, were instrumental in creating this document. So this is basically a document that's been through a variety of different departments and divisions here at the Planning Commission. Next slide, please. The background of August and September of 2018, basically this is when we had a variety of different industrial related plan amendments come forth. And at that time, the Planning Commission started asking questions about, so tell us a little bit more about industrial lands. Tell us a little bit more about what's been going on so that we can have an idea and we can see some data behind what has happened in the marketplace, not only in the city of Tampa, but the other 2 municipalities, Temple Terrace and Plant City, as well as unincorporated Hillsborough County. Next slide, please. That went to basically some data and analysis that we provided the planning commissioners, good bit of maps and a good bit of data to show how many acres we have, where those acres are located, excuse me, and to what extent they are actually developed. And all of this material is available on the Planning Commission website under the land use study. Next slide, please. Again, in May of 2019, we went back and provided more data. And again, this data and analysis is following in a lockstep with some plan amendments that were going through that time for the city of Tampa and for unincorporated Hillsborough County. And then in the September of 2019, so a little over 9 months, 10 months ago, we actually started this land use study. We were lucky enough to have Taylor Hague from the University of South Florida as a USF fellow working with us now. Taylor is now fully employed through the city of Largo, and we'll come up here in just a second and actually provide a little bit of that information for you. So what is some of this background? Again, 1 in 5 acres, excuse me, next slide. And since 2012, about 1 in 5 acres of industrial land have been rezoned to residential or mixed use. Now, it's interesting to talk about that with the mixed use, because when we say mixed use, probably everybody thinks of channel side, or they think of mixed use development that might occur in a transit-oriented development. Well, it's interesting because mixed use categories in unincorporated Hillsborough County, such as community mixed use 12 or suburban mixed use 6, they have an allowance for light industrial uses. So when we have an industrial land that's being changed to residential or to mixed use, what it's doing is it's opening itself up to a variety of different uses. What happens most of the time we see is the new uses that are introduced through that plan amendment basically usurps the industrial interest. Basically, the market says, well, it looks like this would be better for an apartment complex, or it looks like this would be better for a Publix grocery store, but no longer for the industrial use. And that's some of those uses that we're seeing change. So with that idea, we did this research. Now, during all this time, COVID happened. And Yasser was very instrumental in bringing this up. And we have a lot of what ifs that occur here, basically coffee table talk, about all of us. And one of those what ifs that came out of this was we got to see an immediate need and importance of national security for your industrial lands. We immediately saw on the national news that we could not actually develop hand sanitizer in the United States quickly enough to get it to market. Ventilators, a variety of other the breathing masks, the N95 masks. So there was a variety of different things where we saw, okay, industrial lands are needed for your national security. It is interesting, of course, to say that through this, you also got to see a shift in our marketplace. Sometimes it was a little bit late, but you did see the shift. Part of that shift is you got to see manufacturers that made bilge pumps or sump pumps all of a sudden making ventilators. You got to see distilleries, those who were making liquor, whether they're making gin and vodka, all of a sudden making hand sanitizer. So you got to see the market react, and you got to see a little bit of that grit that makes America what it is and can switch very quickly on a dime to actually produce materials that are needed when the market, and when in this case, a public health emergency arises. Next slide, please. So in 2019, the industrial land categories, these are basically your Department of Revenue codes. And this, again, is one of the things where the Planning Commission has expanded its roster of individuals who work for it. And this is something that Yasser brought to us. And this was very good because these are the Department of Revenue codes. So this is the tax stamp, if you will, on some acreage that we have here in the industrial lands. So basically what you're doing is, what does the market support? Where in our world, our universe of Hillsborough County, are we utilizing industrial lands? Currently, about 70% of the 20,000 acres that are being utilized under our Department of Revenue code are looked at warehouse and some light manufacturing of goods and services. So again, with our changing economy and our changing dynamics that we have, next slide, please, you can see the forecast going from 2015 to 2045. So 45,000 additional industrial jobs. However, the share of all jobs will decrease as we have a variety and an expansion of our economy in the service sector as well as commercial. So when you think about it, go back to that number, you have 20,000 acres that are currently being utilized. So one thing that you would want to ask yourself is, how many acres do we actually have in the county that have an industrial land use? We currently have just shy of 30,000 acres that have an industrial land use. These are specific industrial land uses: heavy industrial, light industrial planned. These are not those that would allow for a variety of other uses, such as the suburban mixed use 6 or community mixed use 12, or in the city of Tampa, the transitional use 24, that allow for residential uses and commercial uses. So we have acreage underfoot that says we should possibly be able to absorb those 45,000 additional jobs if we have the vacant developable lands. So that's kind of where we go into that next step that Taylor will talk about, is what type of policy language do we have here? What type of policy language is elsewhere? And how can we start to have that conversation as we depart 2015 and we move towards 2045 to make sure that we set ourselves up to actually meet the demand of the employment forecast. And next slide, and with that, Mr. Taylor.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the Commission. So how we started this entire project was essentially a giant research project. And I looked around the entire state primarily and tried to find and compare how our policy handles industrial lands compared to other similar jurisdictions around the state. What we found, some of the common threads were factors such as mobility protections, primarily in the ports. Here in the city of Tampa, primarily with the port, we have most of the land acreage under industrial land usage, while we find that other jurisdictions, example would be the Port of Miami, find that they have their own particular land use designation, a transportation land use designation that provides additional protections for port-related activities. What we found in the annexations, and primarily in the ancillary cities of Plant City and Temple Terrace, is that Plant City is rapidly converting over to an industrial base, transitioning away from its primarily agricultural production. And in Temple Terrace, conversely, while there is some industrial sectors, it's primarily a residential area with very little industrial impact. And like Jay mentioned, a lot of the industrial activity going on in Tampa is economy-based. A lot of it is conversion to mixed uses, and as those become in higher demand as we go forward in time. Next slide, please. So one of the most interesting things found during the period of research was more quantitative-based analysis for determining land use availability, particularly one found in Miami-Dade, which bases its industrial land usage on a measure of availability. And this is based on the subdivided areas known as the minor statistical areas, which break up the entire county. And each measure is computed based on each MSA. And the threshold is 15 years for their particular policy. And how it works is that if the application will diminish the supply of industrial land below 15 years, applicant must show development will not impede future industrial usage inside that MSA. And we'll go into that on the next slide. So here's an example here's how it works. So in 2010, you find that you have 200 acres of industrial average developed in your area. In 2020, you have 300 acres. So in 2020, your vacant industrial acreage is 500 acres, and your absorption rate over that time is you have 100 divided by 10 years, and that equals 10 acres per year. So the industrial land supply based on your developed acreage in 2020 would be 300 divided by 10 acres per year, which means you have 30 years, quote unquote, available to your area. Next slide, please. So kind of putting this into two examples, if we had two separate applications here. So taking that last example, if an applicant wanted to rezone 100 existing industrial acres, the industrial land supply will then be reduced to 40 years remaining. So they have the 400 acres because they want to rezone 100 off of the 500 available. And our 10 acres per year absorption rate leaves us with 40 acres per year. This is above the 15-year threshold, so the application would have cleared the specific hurdle. Next slide. And conversely, if they want to rezone 400 of those acres, since we only have 100 acres remaining of industrial land after this would fall below the 15-year threshold, and then the applicant would need to show that any future industrial development will not be impeded inside the specific MSA or other delineated area. Next slide, please. So we've kind of put this to the test, crunched the numbers, and we found that there were 24 zip codes within the surrounding area with industrial lands in both 2012 and 2019. And of those, only 3 of them were shown to have 15 years of industrial land supply remaining. And you can see those 3 are in the blue, the shades of blue showing greater intensity of years left. Next slide, please. So what is the conclusion for this? So we've mentioned that a lot of this is research-based, and the current trends show that that Tampa does have has industrial land as essential to its economic base, but it's continuously declining in favor of transitional and mixed-use areas in a variety of parts. Plant City is a net increase of industrial acreage as it continues to transition away from a primarily agricultural base. And like I mentioned, Temple Terrace does not put as heavy an emphasis on industrial land use. We found that quantitative method of industrial land management could serve as a valuable tool, the Miami method in particular. And it's important to note that this is not a solution, but a tool that can be utilized when making decisions that could potentially affect the industrial supply of a particular jurisdiction or area. And as a reminder, only 3 of 24 zip codes have a 15-year supply, which is just an example of this policy in action. Next slide, please. And some other stats that were pretty important were since 2012, we have lost 1 in 5 industrial acres, mostly to other land uses that have been preferred during the time. And we do have 20,000 acres of industrial land remaining in the county, with 70% of that devoted to warehousing and good processing. And this report is available online. And with that, next slide, please. I thank you, commissioners, for your time, and we're opening up to questions.
Thank you for the presentation. This time I will open it up to the public or any comments on this item. I don't see any hands raised. You get anything, Melissa?
I have not had anyone chat me asking to speak.
On this. All right. Questions from commissioners? I see Commissioners Doughty and Commissioners Powell appearing on the scene. Commissioner Doughty, you have a question? Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm a little confused in some of this. I don't particularly care for the Miami example that was provided as far as taking things down to a 15-year limit. Maybe I'm just not really completely understanding the purpose of doing that, but I mean, eventually you get to the stage where you only, you could technically pass that threshold with rezonings and get yourself down to a 15-year supply, and then you're stuck. And the presentation was saying you have to demonstrate that future industrial development is not hindered by that loss in acreage. I'm not really sure how you would necessarily do that. I guess I'm more interested in the fact that we do have a port. Our port relies upon industrial lands in order to function and continue to maintain. We've lost some lands to what was called more preferential land uses at those times. But I mean, for my recollection, at least, having been on the Planning Commission since before the 2012, when all those lands have been lost, there's always been a discussion about how much industrial land we have. And because it's limited, we don't end up rezoning from something else to industrial. We're rezoning from industrial to something else and losing it. So I know there's a bit of a toss-up, I guess, or discussion on how much of it do we really need and how much of it can we give away. But it just seems to me that every piece of it that we give away, it's gone forever. We're never going to get it back. And if we need, like the presentation started, and like this pandemic has shown, I mean, it appears that we need to have industrial lands and manufacturing for, like Jay was saying, for the national security issues in order to be able to do the things that we need to do in the United States. So I think the topic needs a lot more discussion before we can really come up with a suitable method for getting rid of industrial lands. I'm not really sure what else to say. I don't have a specific question for you, but well, maybe, I mean, if Plant City is growing in the industrial areas, I mean, are we basically saying that we, as Hillsborough County, want our industrial base to shift to the east? And is that what we're saying we want to have happen? Because it is.
I don't know if that is a policy decision that has been made, certainly for the city of Plant City or for unincorporated Hillsborough County. Obviously, the availability of lands along County Line Road as they are annexed into the city of Plant City, it does seem as though the private owners of those lands are most interested, as well as the city of Plant City, most interested in seeing a warehouse and distribution market established in that area. Commissioner, you are 100% right about the strategic aspects of the port. The port is one, warehouse and distribution is one small aspect of operations. And so, you know, I can see that there would be a need for warehouse and distribution within the port, most definitely. I don't know the balance between what is occurring in eastern Hillsborough County and what is occurring in the port with the law things. I do know that the port has expanded its cargo container facilities and the ability for it to move cargo in and out. So I think it's more of our economy maturing, and it's more of this area itself. Again, I can remember 600,000 additional people coming into the county by 2045. Not only do they just need a home to live in, but they're going to need stuff for that home, and obviously the port. And then what is happening in eastern Hillsborough County is there strategically to do just that.
All right, well, I'd like to hear if Commissioner Powell has something to say. I'll think for a minute to see if I've got another follow-up for you.
All right, very good. Thank you, Commissioner Dowdy. Commissioner Powell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, Taylor, I had a question for you. Is it possible to go to the slide that shows the zip codes with the three zip codes with the supply? I don't know if anyone else, you know, kind of caught on to this, but my first impression was, you know, the two zip codes here, 33619 and 610, you know, I think that it's really going to be, you know, critical that we have the availability of, you know, industrial lands that are going to be along, you know, I-75, you know, 275, you know, and I-4, you know, so that way those are our major road lines. And even with the port's expansion of its, you know, container business, you know, they're still going to have to load those onto, you know, trucks or rail, probably going to be on more trucks than anything. And those trucks are going to be able to, they need to be able to have access to, you know, the roadways. And I can't imagine the feasibility of having things down and, you know, all the way over by the base, you know, for that being like a really great area, you know, for industrial, in my opinion. But I'm curious in how your study, if it factored in at all, the urban surface area, kind of stops as we start going towards, Polk County and those areas. And has there been any thought, or was there any thought? And hey, if we expand, the USA, and I know there's been some discussions about certain areas, that happening for residential purposes, but having a commercial industrial thought process here and say, hey, maybe we need to look at if we can increase or expand the USA, for those areas specifically along like the I-4 corridor, that's just going to allow us to continue to be very competitive for these large industrial, businesses that are coming in trying to open up, so more Amazon facilities, because I don't think that, we want to lose out on those jobs. As Jay was, pointing out, these people are going to, as they're moving to the county, we need to have the ability to accommodate, very skilled workforce. So was there any component of that at all, like saying, hey, if we expanded the USA, that we could, increase our, our supply at all?
So when we first started this, and I'll defer to Mr. Gonzalez when I'm finished, but for the most part, when we started this presentation, we were entirely limited in our scope of research and data input as to what we had available. And the reason why we use zip codes is because that was the most readily accessible data for us at the time in order to be able to determine the change in industrial acreage. Initially, when we were still first testing this out, we wanted to basically see how it would work. So at the time we had gone on of data accessibility. I'm not sure if it's changed since I've left. Mr. Gonzalez, is there something you'd like to add to that?
Yes, good afternoon. How y'all doing? This is Yasser Gonzalez, staff. In terms of there's been some discussions in terms of how a expanding infrastructure leads to the economic development, and more specifically in the Waimama and Baum area. For those areas that are outside the USA, there's been some hurdles for them to reach in order to generate jobs there. So to your point is, if the USA is expanded, again, we're not taking sides here, we're just arguing, there will be infrastructure that will need to be put in place. And because of the existence of that infrastructure, you may see industrial development. But again, that will be taken into account, especially as you mentioned, I-4, I-75 corridors. They will be, because of the infrastructure, the county will put in, or the cities will put in infrastructure there. Then, industrial developers will be looking at that favorably. So it is, whatever that you have infrastructure, you're definitely going to have a concomitant residential and hopefully industrial. Now, because of the losses we've had, we need to be a little more vigilant, perhaps a little more careful in terms of making sure that, as this infrastructure is being put in place, that we see both residential and job support. And we've been doing that with a study, again, of the Baum and Waimama area right now. Thank you.
Oh, so so was that a part of, you're saying, part of like the RP2 like studies was, there was a component looking at industrial infrastructure?
Yes, there was a component not only of future industry, but also what are the hurdles, what are the impediments to industrial development in that area? For example, for a downtown Waimama, down in a village development. So for the area specifically outside of the USA. So as you say, when infrastructure goes in, sewer, water, and other infrastructure, and that would also be make it more amenable for industrial development. Now, as we know, there's been a tendency to, leaning towards a residential type use. So we will have to be a little more vigilant and make sure that there are those lands, specifically as there are some, as we know now, national security implications for dramatically losing industrial lands.
Sure. Well, thank you for that. I just, as we going forward, maybe something that staff can kind of have on their radar. I don't think there's anything specifically we can do, but I definitely think that it would be a good idea and for national security reasons and for, a host of other, for jobs, to be mindful that we need to have the ability and the flexibility to have industrial lands, along, like our major, roadways and, again, 75 and I-4 specifically, because otherwise I think we will lose out, a lot to the Polk County, and I hate to see that happen. So, thank you.
And if I may, Commissioner, if I may, if we move towards the update to our comprehensive plan, we will be keeping that in mind. And as we talk to the local residents, talk to you guys, talk to, other authorities in Plant City, they will also inform us of how they are envisioning locally how this, lands that are strategically located that can take more advantage of highways, railroads, and ports can take advantage, like that, when it goes there, that industrial land is developed. So yeah, there's a feedback loop. We just need to be just more vigilant because of our tendency to, because of the losses we've had. Let's just say that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. See Commissioner Dowdy's back. Go ahead.
Well, I'd just like to add to what Commissioner Powell was saying and say, I mean, I'm sure, Melissa's aware and that staff is doing this or should continue to do it. But I would, if we have a discussion about the potential, I don't know, loss may be the wrong word, but the loss of industrial lands, having some of the port people involved in discussion that might be able to give you, they have a long-term plan. They might be able to project their needs and be able to have a say in it. I mean, obviously they don't need to drive the entire discussion, but they ought to have a say in it. We don't want to institute policies that are going to choke off or hurt our port, basically.
Yeah, and if I may, I would I think there are a number of policies in both the city of Tampa's and the county's comprehensive plans speaking to them having a port activity center, so an area of influence around the port that specifically, if we get a plan amendment within those geographies, we make sure that we get input from the port on those changes, because that's sort of their sphere of influence, areas that they may be looking for expansion in the future. So we definitely coordinate with them on that. I would just simply add that I would say these decisions on plan amendments in the past have been a place where it seems that the policy language has not always guided us with the most clear direction on how to handle some of these industrial conversions. There are areas, as Commissioner Powell mentioned, the darker blue on this map, is an area that probably many of us don't think of as a very industrial area anymore, but it used to be historically in the city of Tampa, has some very heavy industrial uses along that area to the west of West Shore Boulevard in particular. But we've seen a number of plan amendments in that area over time. And now that it almost reaches more of a tipping point where you've got more residential around it. And so I think what we tried to do with this report was look for opportunities to better quantify some of the need for industrial lands so that we can get a better handle on that question of, okay, as a community, how much do we need going forward? But I think what I'm hearing from you all is the continued need to marry that with some qualitative criteria that get at things like roadway and rail access, location in terms of proximity to some other uses like the port that might be very strategic for our community going forward. And I think from staff standpoint, the goal is to hopefully arrive at some policy direction in particularly the county and the city's plans that provide more clear direction when these situations come up. So I just would offer that as a
All right. Do you have anything else, Commissioner Dowdy? Nope. All right. I see Commissioner Cardenas popped up. Yes.
You know, a couple thoughts is just this is all developed and it's great, but in light of COVID, and I mean, besides COVID, I think that our society has been going for a long time now towards a place where these big box stores were kind of barely making it by, and the internet revolution has kind of stepped in and it's kind of changed everything. You know, a lot of these companies that are going out right now and are going out of business, I mean, they were already in their last string. This is just this wasn't, you know, COVID to them wasn't, you know, something that totally destroyed their business. It was just the last string that they were standing on. And with that said, you know, where are we industrial wise? You know, Amazon's coming in and they're building these huge Amazon facilities. And I mean, this is, you know, our society is changing. The way we do business is changing. We're all at home right now. Well, are we going to need as much office? You know, a lot of things are changing. So that was one point that I just kind of wanted to bring up that I've been thinking about as this has been going on. And then the other thing is, you know, if this is a certain amount of industrial land per year, I mean, do we have a barometer that we go by every year that, you know, as we're making these decisions and as we're, you know, do we have a way to track this, that as we see, oh, somebody's looking for some type of change away from industrial. Okay, how many have we done this year? Is there anything like that? Is that something that the Planning Commission already does? The planners do? They keep in mind? Is there anything that we have that we kind of have that in the back of our heads as we're making decisions? Just a couple thoughts.
Yeah. So to date, we don't have an adopted standard or barometer, if you were, that is sort of we're benchmarking against. But it is certainly something that we track in terms of what the land use is, where the changes are happening, things of that, so that we can start to see the trends and how different areas in the community are developing. But we don't have an established in any of the comprehensive plans benchmark to be looking to each year.
Mr. Gonzalez? Yes.
Yes, indeed. Good afternoon once again. Yasser Gonzalez, staff.
We do have a plan amendment database, which at least you can query the data on. There's a variety of different data sets we have.
Ms. Collins, you're breaking up. We can barely get you there. Say again.
Please, Yasser, go ahead.
Oh.
If I may, thank you very much once again, Yasser Gonzalez, staff. To reiterate something that was said earlier, we do have in place this MOUs with the port.
Please, Yasser, go ahead.
With the port and the airport, where if something comes in, we notify them, and we have a specialized team and special teams like in football, where they go in there and have a one-on-one with the airport, try to make sure that this is not adversely impacted in how this specific change in land use may impact them. Now, also to your point, Commissioner Cardenas, is that it is the face of manufacturing industrial. It is changing, like you said. We have a smaller footprint. There's a lot of, for example, manufacturing inside the USF campus that we don't think about as a manufacturing hub, but it is there. Now, it's not to the scale that we provide, let's say, a national market, but it's something that's things being developed there that can be scaled somewhere else. So you do have that as these warehouses and malls, churn. You're going to have again both. You're going to have some breweries moving in. You're going to have some other like industrial chemicals moving in. But again, it has to be compatible with the use, and we have to really look at that. But there are opportunities there for sure. Yes, that we may not be taking into account right now because it's already zoned as a large box store, let's say, but that can be turned, and so that's happening. As you may see, for example, and that's not in our county, but the Tampa Bay Downs is now seem to be like a logistics center for Amazon. Like on the Pinella side, like dog racing tracks. That seems to be like a logistics center for Amazon there. That's kind of developing. So you see how it got sold for that, but yet how that's kind of churning. So you will see that, yes.
Excuse me, Chairman, I hate to interrupt you, but my audio just stopped on recording on me.
Okay.
If we can just pause for a moment so I can correct this.
All right.
I need him now. My audio just totally went out. I do apologize, Chairman. It is going to take me a moment to restore it.
All right.
Program shut down. Yes.
Okay, go ahead and start recording again.
Okay. Yep. It looks like we're back up, sir. Sorry about that.
All right. Thank you. All right. We'll continue on. I think Commissioner Cardenas was speaking. Done? All right. Good. All right. Thank you. Commissioner Powell, did you have another question? I saw you pop back up.
Yes,
Go ahead.
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe this is probably more for Melissa, but are we we're still doing an I-4 corridor study, correct? Are we still in the middle of that, or have we begun that?
So the county has begun an assessment of, I believe, of the land along the I-4 corridor. They were looking at what the feasibility was to have some other land uses out there besides rural lands, as well as what some of the infrastructure needs would be. So my understanding was that was going to be and may have already been started by the county staff.
I think that it would be a great idea if we can include into that study, bringing in some of the information that we've learned, from this, and seeing how we can, have some of those lands, I guess being rezoned or whatever we need to do, for industrial purposes. So that way we can have, some of the larger, more, intensive, uses, over there. So that way we can be, again, just competitive with, surrounding counties and, maybe not losing or, or attracting some of those, development deals, away from Lakeland and, over in here into us.
Yeah.
So,
no, I think that's
if we can add that element, to it, I think that would be, a good use of staff time.
Yeah, great.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? I just wanted to add myself. I thought that the study was a very great piece of work. Obviously, Jay, you have dealt with me over the past year, clamoring for industrial lands information, and this is obviously the report that I've been clamoring for quite some time. I thought it was really good, the work you guys did. I can see Yasir's influence that's coming on through the statistical analysis and the focus on the methods and stuff that were used and rooted out through the consultant. I think that in echoing my fellow commissioner's statements, Commissioner Dowdy's statements specifically about Miami, I agree with. I disagree with the use of Miami as the key example that our community would be going. Why? For similar reasons, the 15-year, time length and things like that, and the feasibility, again, of proving no, impacts in the future, things like that. So I echo those statements. I also thought there was an opportunity here, and I noticed in some of the writings when you spoke about Plant City, you spoke about the fact that a lot of the industrial development that was going on was kind of on the border between the Plant City Polk area and pushing on that area. I've spoke about this in several other areas that have been brought before us in months recent past, but I think there's an opportunity to start to think about and talk to what's going on the other side of the county, in the other county over there on the other side of the border. Obviously, that's not our jurisdiction, and we need to take care of things in our backyard before we even start to think about looking in other backyards. But there is some opportunity for interregionality, something that we try to push for a lot in other areas, right? We start to talk about bus and transportation, and it's all about interregional. Now we're talking about industrial on the border of the county, and nobody's saying anything about interregionality. So I think there's an opportunity here for interregionality that we're not looking at, and we need to start looking at those things, especially when they start to line up close to the borders of our county. The last thing that I wanted to say that I thought was interesting that came out of this study, that's been said a million times, but we seem to say it and move on from it really quick, is the fact that the city of Tampa is running out of industrial land, losing industrial land at a pretty good clip. But if we go to the policy documents for the city of Tampa, one of the biggest things that it says in there is that they want to save industrial land. And it seems like we're unwilling to make this statement that the market forces or what we're seeing on the ground is not what the community is saying or has said in the past is what they want to see going forward. I think we have to confront that head on, and I don't know what the answer to that is, yes or no, but the city of Tampa they're headed towards something here. And for us to just keep, overlooking that fact and saying, well, yeah, there just needs to be more industrial land. Yeah, we just need to save in more industrial land. And every year they're losing more industrial land. I think that's an issue that needs to be dealt with. And I don't know if that's us. It could be development services, but it has to be dealt with. And the last thing that I wanted to say about the methods that were involved is, and I bring this up because the question was asked at the start of this, what would our kind of direction be on this? For me personally, I don't feel that this is a document that belongs in our comprehensive plan. When we start specifying stuff and trying to time development by markets using, very advanced statistical methods, I feel that that's something that should live again in more regulatory documents. You know what I mean? To be able to change with the times. Again, we're doing comprehensive things here. We're dealing with policy. We're dealing with ideas that the community wants to see in the future. If we put this method in our documents and next month the next greatest method comes up, then what do we do? You know what I mean? So I'd like to see this live as something that maybe we use this whenever we hire a consultant. We say, hey, consultant, maybe you want to look at these methods when we're talking about industrial research, and we have this kind of cache of methods that we like for our consultants or whoever to use. But I think it works better that way than being implanted into the comprehensive plan. And those were my only thoughts, but it was a great piece of work and I really enjoyed reading it. I can see everybody's efforts in it. And I wanted to applaud you all, the staff and the consultants on the document. And that's all from me. All right. Were there any other comments from anyone else or? Nope. All right. Then we will close out this one and go on to our next item. Oh, I'm giving something. Nope. Item number 4, is it? The Agrihood study, Diego Guerra.
We can't hear you, Diego.
You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there
Yes.
you go.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Diego Guerra, Planning Commission staff. This item is the review of the Agrihood Case Studies Report, which was completed in May. Agrihoods have become a new development trend, and this presentation is for informational purposes only. Different from urban gardening, the term agrihood centers on agriculture combined with neighborhoods and stems from farm to table eating, urban farming, food co-ops, and community-supported agricultural initiatives. Agrihoods promote health through access to fresh produce and social interaction with educational opportunities intended to foster community and social ties. Over the last several years, the demand for master plan communities centered around golf courses has decreased, especially among younger home buyers, while agrihoods have increased in demand throughout the country. Agrihoods are primarily developed as master planned residential housing communities and are primarily located in suburban and rural areas. Their purpose is to preserve natural lands and existing farmland by allocating space for agriculture, food production, and natural features in development, many of which employ professional farmers or have formed partnerships with other stakeholders to manage food production. Agrihoods have similar amenities that many master plan communities have, such as clubhouses, pools, recreation centers, and playgrounds. However, agrihoods tend to also have barns for small farm animals. Many also include community kitchens and a general store where produce is grown, where produce grown is sold, but also offers local organic products produced by partners of the agrihood. Agrihoods as a development trend have the ability to produce multiple benefits for individuals and communities while enhancing real estate performance. Still, there are some risks, of course, being a farm as part of a community. For example, weather, plant disease, and other unforeseen circumstances that can have a result in crop loss. Agrihoods present a unique situation for local governments and planning agencies. In most cases, land use and zoning policies are not established to encourage or often allow the development of such communities. Furthermore, most zoning standards separate or limit allowable uses and specify minimum lots for housing, thereby making clustering of development difficult. Even with these challenges, communities and developers have found various ways to create agriculture-centered communities. The report provided in your packet is primarily on land use policy and provides case studies from various communities in 4 states and offers examples that farmers, developers, and property owners are able to review and does not provide implementation recommendations. And the next following slides, I'll provide a few case study examples that are provided in your packet as part of the report. Located just north of Richmond, Virginia, Chickahominy Falls is a 180-acre residential community that is zoned single-family residential and multifamily residential. Although these zoning districts within the county do not allow community gardens or agricultural activities within these particular zoning districts, what makes Chickahominy Falls unique as an agrihood is Woodside Farms, a privately owned and managed farm located within the red polygon on the bottom of the graphic. Woodside Farms is a 10-acre professionally managed 4-season farm that is zoned agricultural, and the barn, which is the social and educational hub of the community, is located on the farm property and is allowed in that zoning district as a conditional use. Woodside Farms relies on a community-supported agriculture initiative, also known as CSAs. Historically, in CSAs, members of the public would become a member of the initiative and would assist in agricultural activities, assisting farmers with planting, harvesting, and other activities on the farm. And in return, the farmers would share their harvest. However, in many areas, these initiatives have transitioned into more of a subscription membership service, also known as a CSA farm share. And in this model, community members financially invest in the farm at the beginning of the season, allowing the farmer to better plan and budget for the upcoming season. In return of the community's members' investment, the farmer will grow a variety of fruits and vegetables, and in some cases, community members can pick and choose from the harvest, while in others, members receive a packed box of produce. Ultimately, the community members do receive a share of the harvest. CSAs allow for all members of a community or jurisdiction to participate in the program, which is the case for Woodside Farms and many of the other Agrihoods in this report. What this means is that the CSA initiative is not only specific to the development community with the Agrihood, it's actually opened for all members of the municipality, the jurisdiction, the county that want to participate in the CSA. The farm specifically, it just happens to be located in or adjacent to the Agrihood. The next example is Willisford, which is located outside Washington, D.C. Willisford is a 4,000-acre residential development which offers 2,000 acres of open space, approximately 40 miles of trails, and zoned as transitional residential 3. This zoning district allows for both residential and agricultural mixed uses. The Loudoun County Comprehensive Plan outlines the county's desire to foster land use and development patterns that incorporate natural and agricultural resources to preserve its natural character. Additionally, the county's comprehensive plan encourages cost-share initiatives to support working farms and the establishment of conservation easements, while also calling for the preservation and protection of farmland. The purpose and intent of the transitional residential zoning district is to achieve a balance between the built and natural environment, protect and integrate open space and natural resources, encourage new development designs that incorporate both suburban and rural features. Farm co-ops, farm-based tourism, and farm markets are considered permitted uses under the transitional residential zoning district. Part of this Agrihood also gives tours to the farm, education, and does partnerships with the local schools and their 4-H clubs, which falls in with these uses. Willisford Farm is managed by Willisford Conservancy Land Management Program. It's a nonprofit organization that manages all of the 2,000 acres of open space, which also includes the 300-acre farm. The farm includes some small livestock consisting of chickens and pigs, which is allowed in the zoning district. The Willisford Farm is also part of the CSA initiative, which the Willisford HOA, general public, and other partners take part in. The general store located in the development sells a lot of the products that these partners also produce. Next is Serambi, located outside Atlanta, Georgia. Serambi, what makes this Agrihood unique among Agrihoods, and it's considered to be one of the top rated Agrihoods in the nation, is that the municipality where this particular Agrihood is located, the city of Chattahoochee Hills, was incorporated in 2007 with the sole purpose of preserving as much as possible the rural character of that community while controlling development as a suburb of Atlanta. So its purpose is to essentially prevent urban sprawl into the community from Atlanta, and the community is located south of the city. The 2006 update to the city of Chattahoochee Hills comprehensive plan revises land uses into a town, village, hamlet form, integrated with traditional rural agriculture and development, with a strong focus on allowing agricultural uses. Serambi is designed with a mixed use and 4 residential hamlets consisting of their own complementary commercial centers. Following the guidelines of the comprehensive plan, the property also features farmettes, which are essentially small private farms or ranches, also located within the Agrihood. Sarabi is also a special zoning district intended to provide a location for agriculture and residential uses to be in close proximity to smaller scaled commercial or office uses to encourage a pedestrian-friendly traditional urban form. The Agrihood includes single-family, multifamily, and live-work units and a 25-acre professionally managed farm. And in Florida, we actually have a few as well. The first one I will cover is named Arden, and it's located in Palm Beach County. It's a 1,200-acre master development community that was started a couple years ago. The master development community is part of the Glades Area Protection Overlay District, which is designed to protect the agricultural production area in the Glades from encroachment by urban and other detrimental uses to agricultural activities. Arden's future land use designation is low residential 2 and is zoned as residential planned unit development. Arden utilizes the Glades Area Protection Overlay District's intent of protecting agricultural activities from typical master plan communities by including a community farm, recreational trails, and environmental easements. Additionally, Palm Beach County's Land Development Code allows for a plot of land used primarily as a vegetable garden, which is cultivated and harvested by residents of the surrounding area and all residential zoned areas. The LDC does not state what size the plot of land for these activities has to be. The Glades Area Protection Overlay District complements existing provisions in the comprehensive plan by creating a barrier to the expansion of urban and suburban activities while providing the opportunity to recognize existing uses and new uses within the overlay district. At the center of Arden is a 5-acre farm and event barn, which also houses a general store that offers other local organic products. Arden does employ 2 professional farmers that work full-time and conduct operations and maintenance of the farm. In September 2016, the Orange County Board of County Commissioners approved a 1,200-acre residential community known as the Grow. The master development community will include a 9-acre working farm, 21 acres of community gardens integrated into the 1,200-acre residential community. The Grow has partnered with Do Good Farm, which is a local nonprofit, to manage its farm and community gardens. The construction of the Agrihood is scheduled to start in this upcoming summer, and there has been no news on the delays due to the pandemic. Comprehensive plan amendments and new zoning regulations were adopted for the development to occur. The future land use element now outlines policies for the area and states that the intent is to preserve the rural lifestyle and character of existing communities through design, integration, and preservation of natural resources, amenities such as shared community gardens, greenhouses, and other low-impact agricultural uses. The Grow is located in an agricultural zoning district, and Orange County created a new future land use category and zoning district specifically to allow the development to occur. The comprehensive plan states that all development shall be organized as neighborhoods designed around a centralized focal point, such as a community garden. Additionally, master plan communities in the Lake Pickett zoning district, which is the new zoning district created, are to be further divided into transect zones to control development densities and intensities, and which provide the basis for neighborhood structure. The last example is the proposed Angeline Agrihood development in Pasco County. The Pasco County's comprehensive plan currently does not provide any guiding policies on community gardens or community farms. The property is in the Bexley Ranch sub-area and is part of the Master Planned Unit Development District. According to Pasco County's Land Development Code, community gardens are a permitted use of the zoning district. However, market gardens and community farms are considered conditional uses. The LDC also states such uses are intended to foster community engagement by providing opportunities for recreation, education, training, special events, social interaction, and economic potential benefits, in addition to enhancing community character. Furthermore, the LDC states that the community garden and community farms may be of any size. The Angeline Agrihood is proposed to include residential and commercial uses, a trail system, conservation land, in addition to a working farm. The Moffitt Cancer Center's new Pasco Research Campus was publicized to be the lead entity in the development's commercial park. In conclusion, Agrihood have the capability to demonstrate that master plan communities and agriculture can coexist with new development trends. They serve residents with fresh, quality food. Agrihoods also serve as a social and educational resource for the community and encourages healthy life choices. And Agrihoods make the connection between how we treat our land and the health of those who inhabit it. I've included the link to where the report is located. And this, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes my presentation. I'm available for questions.
You're muted, Commissioner Joseph.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Guerra, for the presentation. Any comments from the public? No hands. I don't see any hands. Any questions from commissioners? I see Commissioner Bernstein. Yes, go ahead. Nope, just showing your face. Glad to see you. Any other commissioners? Any questions or comments? Not at this time. I just wanted to say on my own behalf, Diego, this was a really good presentation. I thought it was very interesting that this is, and I wanted to commend you and the rest of the staff who worked on this. This is the first time that I've seen a look at the rural and the quote suburban areas that is anything other than negative and boo-hooing and complaining. I think, and one of the key things that I found throughout the presentation is right there on the screen in your conclusion. The word master plan is something that we don't harp on enough when we talk about development in our rural and suburban areas. And I think if we had more of these type of master plan communities, as opposed to small one-off enclaves, it would alleviate a lot of things. So I think this Agrihood's direction that we're stepping in, if this needs to be the way that master planning gets its foot in the door more, then I think it's a good thing. So I applaud the effort here in this Agrihood's presentation. Good work.
Thank you.
All right. That is it for item number 4 then. We will move on to item number 5, a briefing on the Hillsborough County Plan Amendment, HCCPA 2014 on context classifications by Katrina Corcoran.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Well, good afternoon. My name is Katrina Corcoran, Planning Commission staff. I'm here today to talk about the Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan text amendment, specifically on context classification for the transportation element. This is a publicly initiated text amendment via the county. It adds a context-based classification plan, which is a place-sensitive approach to roadway design and access management. As you can see on the graphic, the context classification plan takes into consideration the land use surrounding a roadway, starting from a more rural context and steadily moving into a more urban context. It preserves right-of-way and furthers Vision Zero safety goals. And this amendment runs parallel to updates for the transportation technical manuals, roadway cross sections, and the land development codes, access management regulations. There are minor tech changes to the following existing policies that you see listed on this slide. This is primarily adding in context-based classification plan and preservation within these policies. There are also new policies added to the transportation element, including policy 154, which includes context classification definitions within a table, and policy 155, which indicates that the county will coordinate roadway improvements with other jurisdictions. There's also a new definition for context-based classification and the removal of outdated plan implementation and monitoring section. As you can see here, this is the proposed adopted context-based classification map. This is the latest draft version of the map. You can see the green section based on this legend, that is C1 and C2, that is the most rural designation. The orange section is commercial suburban. The yellow section is commercial residential. This brown color is suburban town. The purple color is urban general. C5, which is the pink color, is a more urban context. C5 special district is for special districts, and C6 is the most urban designation. We received several comments from several different agencies, including the City of Tampa. The City of Tampa requested that the county consider adding C5 and C6 to some of their roadways within their jurisdiction, as well as the special district context classification section. Temple Terrace also requested that the county update some of the roadways within their jurisdiction. Plant City also requested that some of the county update some of the roadways within their jurisdiction, and the county updated those roadways for those jurisdictions. The Hillsborough Area Regional Transit commented that they would like to consider transit stop spacing for future context classification studies. However, this is not in regards to this amendment, but in regards to future work. The Tampa Bay Water, Hillsborough County Public Schools, and the Environmental Protection Commission responded but indicated no comments. This concludes my presentation. Matt Lewis and John Patrick, county staff, are here as well to answer any questions, and I'm also available for questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Joseph, I think you might be frozen.
It appears that way.
Is that better?
Well, we can hear you,
Oh, okay.
but we can't hear, you're frozen on the screen, but
Okay. Well, I still see Commissioner Powell on screen, so I will recognize him and have him go ahead and talk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great presentation, Ms. Corcoran. One thing that came to my mind with these classifications, and I'm not sure if this necessarily falls in it, but with the classification of these roadways, does that factor in like sidewalks and things like that nature?
The adjoining update to the Transportation Technical Manual roadway cross sections will be looking more specifically at those kind of things. So what would be more available for C1 and C2 context classifications, what they would specifically require there, whether it be a bike lane or a side path or a sidewalk. So that will go into more of the details of that.
Okay, because if it added that element in there, or there was included, I was in a meeting earlier this morning for the Affordable Housing Board, and we were talking, just about some projects, and about specifically there was quite a bit of money that had recently been spent for like special needs housing. And I know that with our residents that are, with special needs, they have, they need certain things. And I wanted to know if we have, in here, are we thinking about them, when it comes to sidewalks for, for directional aspects, to kind of help, guide them around, or to point them to like information centers, things of that might just be a little more thoughtful, to accommodating them, especially like in the urban core, to help point them around to, places of safety, or, someplace that can help them, thinking about, folks with like Down syndrome, or, things like that nature. So I just didn't know if that thought was, in there, or might include that, but I would love to see that if we could.
Mm-hmm. So as far as this amendment goes, this is more general for the context classification itself. I do know, as I said, that they're working on updates to the transportation technical manual roadway cross sections. But at this time, I wouldn't be able to answer that question unless county staff has more insight into that. This is just more of a general putting in the context classification, and the specification will be in the transportation technical manual.
Okay. All right. Well, and this might not be like the appropriate place, but it seems like a good place to kind of insert it now, and I'd like to see that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Powell. Can everybody see me? Am I moving? You're okay, checking.
Yes, yeah.
Are there any more comments or questions from any other commissioners on this item? I see Commissioner Marino.
Yes.
Recognize her.
Thank you, Katrina. This is something that I'm glad we're doing this. And for those who may have not seen it, the Paula Flores presentation on speed in the particular classifications. So my question is related to that. How quickly can speed limits, or is there anything related if we were to make this change? How quickly could some of the speed limits be amended to reflect the updated classification?
That's a great question. I think the speed limits, again, gets more into the roadway cross sections and the design manual for that. Again, if the county staff on the call have any thoughts on that, that might be more appropriate for them.
So this is John Patrick from Hillsborough County. So we, parallel to this amendment, we are working on the transportation technical manual. And each of these context-based classification and the roadways, concurrent roadways, will have a cross-section, a speed limit, and the volume that each roadway can handle. So those aspects are being worked on right now. So as soon as we have some drafts, I think we can bring it back to the commission and show you how these two fit together. So this amendment, as we are going through, is just the first step that creates this foundation for all these conversations about sidewalks and speed limits. It's all this is a foundation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Right. Are there any other commissioners with any input or any questions? No. All right. I did have a couple questions for you, Katrina. This is intended to be an actual revision to the comp plan, right?
Yes, this is a text amendment to the comp plan.
And the intended goals of this are to basically improve management of roadways throughout the county, correct? My question is, I don't understand why we necessarily need any of this in the comp plan if we refer to state and county law by reference already in our transportation section. Why are we now going in and codifying every single one of the roadways with these things in our comp plan? Why don't we just say transportation and roadways should be handled as per the DOT or the county provision? Why are we now putting this in our documents, I guess would be my question.
So this is separate from the context classification system that FDOT has done. So it is a separate effort by the county. So they would like to put this into the comp plan as they're laying the foundations within those other documents, such as the Transportation Technical Manual and the LDC. But it is not the same context-based classification system that FDOT has. It is a new system brought together by the county. So I think that's why they want to go ahead and bring this forward into the comp plan. There is also a quarter preservation map that's similar to this work. So it would be adding on to that already existing quarter preservation map and that section of policies.
Why not the land development code? Why the comp plan specifically? I understand.
The land development code is also, they're revising the access management regulations for the land development code. But this is just to add into the comprehensive plan. So there are efforts for those for those other documents, but this is adding into the comprehensive plan.
And I would just add that I think the context classification for the roadways is actually a really good intersection of the land use and the transportation components of the comprehensive plan. I think as the plan gets updated further, this will become more of an integral piece in sort of how we layer the land use and the transportation together. They built this based on the land use categories that are in the land use element, and that really guided which of the different context classifications the segments received. And part of what we've been trying to work towards is a more integrated land use and transportation system that doesn't just look at all collectors the same, all arterials the same, or even all segments of the same roadway the same, but begins to look at that these roadways take on these different contexts. The other thing I would add is that because the county has had this foundation of a corridor preservation plan in the comprehensive plan, which dates back probably getting close to 20 years now, that has been a primary tool for them in terms of acquiring right-of-way from as new development has come in or as redevelopment has occurred. And so the idea that this dovetails into that structure would allow, as new development or redevelopment occurs in some of these areas, for these new context classifications to be considered and to ensure that they're getting the right cross-section of right-of-way for what that roadway should be.
Yeah, my concern really is that the impact of the roadway on the land use, right? Not so much the other way around, the impact of the land use on the roadway. So I get where you're coming from, but again, my concern comes from this agency standpoint that we deal a lot with policy, and these things, they're starting to feel effective, these things that we're putting forth, that they're not things that, are easily flexible on a dime. And we live in very changing and adaptable times. What we say here in this meeting this year could be completely wrong when we get a new virus, a new whatever we're going to get next year. You know what I mean? So we classify these roads now, and we're placing all our bets based on this. But and especially when it comes to things that have to deal with transportation, I'm always questioning when we start to, okay, well, this is going to be this and this has to be that, and we're sure right now, and it's the next 5 years, and this is what it's going to be. I'm okay with that living with, again, development agency. I'm okay with that living with FDOT. When we start to get into 30-year comprehensive policy planning, I get kind of nervous when I start to see this level of specificity and this level of, when I went through the document, we're combining certain Cs, and we're taking away this one, and we're doing that one, and it just makes me a little nervous. That's the only sentiment that I wanted to raise at this point as you go forward. If I could just get that sentiment in there as it develops and goes forward, it seems like you guys really are sure about this, but I don't know. And again, I support it. I support the idea. I support the classifications. I support the idea of using land use and development intensity to guide what's happening on the roadway and vice versa. I just don't necessarily feel that our organization is the proper place for that to live. And that's the point I wanted to get across.
I would also add that they did base their classifications on the future land use. So it wasn't just existing land use, it was future land use. So they are looking ahead, at least in that manner.
Well, as we just learned about industrial land, our ideas on future land use too. So that's kind of the point that I'm making.
Well, yeah, and certainly I think our goal would be that all of the comprehensive plan becomes more dynamic, and that it's not something where the comp plan has not been changed in certain regards for 12 years since the last time the county's plan was updated. So our goal would be, once we get it updated, that then that becomes a constant evolution of the plan from that point forward, as opposed to waiting for the next big update. We need to be more responsive to the changes in a quicker, more proactive manner. But your point is well taken about whether or not this level of detail belongs in this planning document, and we'll have some discussions with the county around that.
All right. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very good, by the way, very informative document. All right, moving on to our next item, number 6, which is a bunch of items. Briefing on City of Tampa plan amendments, and we will start with TACPA 2011.
Hi, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
This is Danny Collins. I'm with your Planning Commission staff, and I will be presenting on 10 plan amendments that will be coming before you on the August 10th hearing. These are just briefings, so no actions needed. The first 7 amendments that I'm going to go through are going to be the 4th batch of park amendments, and then we have 3 additional amendments. So 2011 through 2017 are all park amendments. You can see here that they're scattered throughout the city in various parts. Just a quick background, all 7 amendments are publicly initiated by the Tampa City Council. These would recognize existing City of Tampa parks. Each park is listed on the City of Tampa's dedicated park list, and all sites would be recognized through the Recreation Open Space Future Land Use designation. Our first park is Grant Park. It's in the Central Tampa Planning District, and it's in the Grant Park neighborhood. This is an aerial of the subject site and surrounding properties. You'll see the subject site here. It's highlighted in yellow. It's on the east side of North 53rd Street and on the north side of East 30th Avenue. You'll see the surrounding development pattern is predominantly residential. This is the adopted future land use map. Currently, it's in the residential 20 category. It's surrounded by that residential 20 on all sides. This area here, just on the east side of North 56th Street, is within the jurisdiction of unincorporated Hillsborough County. This is the proposed future land use map showing that recreation, open space, and green. The request would remove the potential of residential and non-residential development from the subject site. Are there any questions? Our next plan amendment is TACPA 2012. It's Williams Park. It's in the Central Tampa Planning District, and more specifically in the Eastern Heights neighborhood. Here is an aerial of the subject site and the surrounding properties. It's on the north side of East Osborne Avenue, and it's on the east side of North 30th Street. You'll see the CSX rail just to the east of the subject site. It's just south of James Elementary and Williams Middle, and then it's a couple blocks to the north or to the west of North 40th Street. This is the adopted future land use map. A majority of the site is within that recreation open space. The northern portion of the site, which is shown in this light gray color, is light industrial. You'll see that there is light industrial to the north and east of the site. And then there's residential 10 to the west and south of the site. This is the proposed future land use map showing the subject site in the recreation open space category. Again, this would remove the potential of 79,000 square feet of non-residential development from the subject site. Are there any questions? Our next plan amendment is CPA 2013. It's in the Sunset Park. It's Sunset Park. It's in the South Tampa Planning District and within that Sunset Park neighborhood. Here's the subject site shown in yellow. It is predominantly surrounded by residential uses. It's on West Sunset Boulevard. Here is Southwest Shore Boulevard that kind of runs into the park. The subject site is currently under that residential 6 future land use category. This light blue shaded color here is predominantly water, so there's a significant portion of the site has water on, is wet, and it's predominantly surrounded by that residential 6. This is the proposed future land use map showing the subject site in green under that recreation open space. Again, this would remove the potential of 15 residential dwelling units or approximately 39,000 square feet of non-residential development. Are there any questions? Our next park is CPA 2014. It's a portion of the Oaklawn Cemetery. It's within the Central Tampa Planning District and within the Central Business District. Here is an aerial of the subject site. It's on the north side of East Harrison Street. Here is North Franklin, 1 block to the west. Further to the west is North Florida Avenue, and then it's just south of Interstate 275. This is the adopted future land use map. It's within that Central Business District. This area to the east of the site is currently under that recreation open space, and then there is some RMU 100 further to the east. This is the proposed land use map. We're showing the subject site under the recreation open space. This request would remove the potential of residential or non-residential development from the subject site under that CBD. The maximum is currently not defined, but there is potential. Are there any questions? Our next park is CPA 2015. It's Patterson Street Park. It's in the Central Tampa Planning District. It's in the Old Seminole Heights neighborhood. Here's an aerial of the subject site. It's shown in this yellow color. It's on the north side of East Patterson Street, just south of the Hillsborough River. And it's it's in close proximity to North Nebraska Avenue. You'll see this surrounding development patterns predominantly residential. This is the adopted future land use map. It's currently under that residential 10 future land use category and is surrounded by that residential 10 on all sides. Here's the proposed future land use map showing that subject site under that recreation open space category. Again, this would remove the potential of residential and non-residential development from the subject site. Are there any questions? Our next park is Park Circle Park. It's in the Central Tampa Planning District. It's in the Old Seminole Heights neighborhood. Again, this one's just on the south side of the Hillsborough River. It's on East Park Circle. It's predominantly surrounded by residential, single-family residential. Again, this one is also under that residential 10 future land use category, and it's surrounded by that res 10 on all sides. Here is the proposed future land use map showing the site under that recreation open space category. Again, this would remove the potential of residential and non-residential from the site. Are there any questions? Our last park is Purity Springs Park. This is Comprehensive Plan Amendment 2017. It's within the University Planning District and more specifically in the Lowry Park Central neighborhood. Here's an aerial of the subject site. It is also, this one's on the north side of the Hillsborough River. There is some commercial development just to the north of the subject site, and then there is some residential as you get further west of the subject site. Here's the adopted future land use map. It's currently under the public, semi-public, which is shown in this blue color. And then Res 35 is this triangular sliver to the top. And this would bring the entire site under that recreation open space category. Again, this would remove the potential of residential and non-residential development from the subject site. And that's our last park. Are there any questions on the parks, or you want to move forward? Our next plan amendment is Comprehensive Plan Amendment 2018. It's located at 3615 West Cypress Street. It's within the West Shore Planning District and also within that West Shore Business District. It's located here on our location map. This is an aerial of the subject site and the surrounding properties. The site is shown in this blue color. It's on the north side of West Cypress Street. It's just west of North Himes Avenue, but it's also east of Northdale Mabry. This area here is that Midtown development area. A quick background, this is a privately initiated request. It's a small scale amendment. It's just under a quarter acre. The request is to change the future land use from the community commercial 35 to that regional mixed use 100 category. Here is the adopted future land use map. You'll see that the area to the north of the subject site is under that RMU 100. That was a plan amendment back in 2018 that was approved. This is that Midtown area. There is some CC 35 just to the south of the subject site and along North Himes Avenue. And then there's also Res 10 and Res 20 as you kind of move east and south from the subject site. Here is the proposed future land use map showing that site under the regional mixed use 100 category. Currently, the site can be considered for 8 residential units or just under 21,000 square feet of non-residential development. As proposed, the site can be considered for 24 units or just over 35,000 square feet of non-residential development. Are there any questions? Our next case, or our next amendment, is Tampa Comprehensive Plan Amendment 2019. It's at 3007 North Havana Avenue. It's within the Central Tampa Planning District, and more specifically, it's in that West Tampa Urban Village. Here is the subject site on the locational map. The subject site is shown in here in this blue color. It's just north of the intersection of West Columbus and North Havana Avenue. This is West Kathleen Street. You'll see commercial uses along Columbus and a portion of North Havana. And then you'll start seeing residential as you move further away east and west from the subject site from Havana. Quick background, it's privately initiated. It's a small scale amendment. It's approximately 0.2 acres. The request is to change that future land use category from residential 10 to that community mixed use 35 category. Here is the adopted future land use map. You'll see the site is currently under that Res 10 represented by this orange color. This area along West Columbus Drive is under the CMU 35 category. And then there's some parcels just to the west of the subject site also under the CMU 35 category. This red represents the CC 35. And then this area here is Res 20. This is the proposed future land use map. It shows the subject site under that CMU 35 category. The site currently can be considered for 2 residential units or approximately 3,000 square feet of non-residential development. As proposed, the site could be considered for 7 units or or 17,424 square feet of non-residential development. Are there any questions? Okay, this is our last case. This is Comprehensive Plan Amendment 2020. Subject site is located at 3619 West Cypress Street. This site is also within the West Shore Planning District and within that West Shore Business District. It's immediately to the west of the one I just presented on 2018. And it's shown here on the locational map. Subject site is shown in this blue color. It's on the north side of West Cypress Street. This is North Himes Avenue, and the site is on the east side of North Dale Mabry Highway. It's a companion request with that. Oh, now let's go to the next slide. So this is a publicly initiated request. Due to the RMU 100 requests directly to the east of the subject site and that RMU 100 that exists in the Midtown area to the north, the Planning Commission staff believes it makes sound planning sense to recognize this potential of this portion of West Cypress Street under that RMU 100. We are currently in talks with the property owner on whether to move forward with this request. I will be meeting with the applicant or the property owner hopefully on this Friday to determine whether if he wants to move forward with the request. The site is approximately 0.13 acres. Again, it's going from that CC 35 to that regional mixed use 100 category. This is the adopted future land use map. It's currently under that CC 35 represented by this red color. As proposed, it would go to RMU 100, and this is the proposed future land use map. Currently, the site can be considered for 4 residential units or approximately 11,700 square feet of non-residential development. As proposed, the site can be considered for 13 residential dwelling units or just over 20,000 square feet of non-residential development. Are there any questions?
All right, thank you, Mr. Collins. Just want to ask one more time, commissioners, make sure, I know you went through it kind of quick, make sure there were no questions or comments from commissioners or from the public. I didn't see any hands, obviously. Nope. All right, thank you, Mr. Collins.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our next item. Item number 7 is the Executive Director's Report.
Good afternoon again, Melissa Zornita, Executive Director. Got a, let me just close that. I sent out via email earlier today my report, which outlines a number of meetings that I participated in on behalf of the organization in the last month or so since our last meeting. I did want to highlight just a couple of items on that list. The first being that on June 17th, the Board of County Commissioners held a public hearing to consider extending the 2 moratoriums that were in place in the Balm area on the RP2 land use category and in the Waimama area for the Waimama Village Residential 2 land use category. Those are moratoriums on new rezonings in those areas, and the purpose of them was to permit us time to do the studies and make some changes to those categories. The Board of County Commissioners did approve extending those moratoriums another 9 months, and so that would extend them into May. It has been our commitment to the board that we will move those studies forward as quickly as possible. The primary hurdle that we have in concluding the studies is that the final step in our outreach is an open house with the community. And while we have tried a number of methods to have virtual workshops and community meetings over the last few months, there are some significant issues, particularly given the geographies of these communities and demographics of these communities, to getting good participation from those areas in a virtual setting. So we've seen a reduction in the number of survey participants and number of folks who have participated compared to our in-person open houses that we started this process with. So our goal is to continue moving forward, to hopefully be able to have some sort of hybrid open house where we have a virtual component for those people who feel comfortable doing virtual, and a in-person component that maintains all required social distancing as soon as it is safe for us to begin to gather people in that way. And at this point, we do not have those scheduled because we're hoping to see the cases and percent positives and all the things that have been unfortunately rising in our community of late begin to go down before we schedule those. And we would only turn to concluding those studies in a solely virtual way if we saw that our timeline was really running up against the end of those moratoriums and the timeline that it would take to get a plan amendment adopted in that time. But our hope is that things start to shift soon and we're able to move towards those stages. I mentioned all of this because, as you will note at the bottom of my report, there are several contract extensions and expansions that we're working on executing at this time. And two of those relate to those studies because we have asked the consultants in both of those studies to do some additional outreach because we didn't want it to be such a long time between the last time the community heard from us and when they got to see us in some sort of an open house. We asked for an additional set of stakeholder meetings that are taking place. Some of them took place last month. There's some ongoing conversations that the consultants are having. So we are looking at extending the contracts in terms of time frame, but also adding to the scope of those contracts to cover that additional outreach, as well as additional meetings with staff to work through some of the policy considerations and land development code considerations. So that was supplied in my report as well. I also wanted to mention that at our last meeting, outgoing County Administrator Mike Merrill was able to join us for us to wish him a fond farewell. And Beth Alden and I had the opportunity to meet with the new County Administrator, Bonnie Wise, last week. And that was a good opportunity to bring her up to speed on some of the projects that we're working on behalf of the county, such as the Waimama and the RP2, as well as some of the outreach that we've been looking at as it relates to broader growth issues, and beginning to move that forward now that things have maybe begun to create a new normal. Some of the looks at outreach in terms of a telephone survey and converting from focus groups to some stakeholder interviews. Again, not trying to create more instances where we're gathering people together, but wanting to get some more detailed and in-depth input from stakeholders about some of the policy decisions that the Board of County Commissioners would be wrestling with as we move towards updating some of the other components of the comprehensive plan. The August 10th meeting, you will have a regular meeting and two public hearings, one on a couple of these county plan amendments, the one that you were briefed on today, as well as the One Water amendment will be coming forward, and then you will have the Tampa public hearing on all of the items that Danny just briefed you on. In terms of agency operations, I did want to just update you all that we continue to predominantly be working from home. County Center continues to not be open to the public on a basis, as they don't want people going up into the elevators on a frequent basis. We do have staff who are going into the office regularly to make sure mail and other things like that are getting taken care of. So there is the ability for us to go in, but we found that the telecommuting is working as well as it could be for having to operate virtually and have a lot of meetings where we're looking at screens. We have developed a whole series of standard operating procedures related to working telecommuting, reopening under the current pandemic, and how that will operate in terms of scheduling staff in the office. We've unfortunately had one staff person test positive for COVID-19, so we now have procedures in place for how to handle positive tests results and what is required before somebody re-enters the office in that instance. So I've been thankful that we have a great office manager and HR team who have been able to quickly adapt a number of our policies to work in this very fluid situation. And at this point, we would anticipate that the August meeting would also be a virtual meeting. That will, to great degree, depend on the governor's executive orders continuing to permit virtual meetings going forward. But at this point, there's not a space in County Center for us to invite the public to, so we would be continuing to operate in this manner. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions from commissioners? I don't see any takers. All right, thank you, Melissa.
Sure thing.
All right, on to our next item, item 8, other business, chair's business, old business, none, new business. Anyone? Any takers? No? All right, committee reports. There we go. I knew there had to be some. There we are. Commissioner Marino.
Thank you, sir. The MPO had their transportation improvement program meeting on June 30th. The TIP did pass 13-3. There was one amendment, a study of the CSX rail lines for the use of passenger movement or transit movement moved up on the list in the priority list. There were 3 amendments that would have amended the 275 corridor, specifically 275 north to Bears. That failed 7-8. The 14th and 15th Street configuration, Ybor City, that failed 6-10. And then removing the portion from Lois to downtown failed 4-12. And then just to recap, also, I think we didn't go over, but the Louisville Roadways Committee meeting at our last meeting, one of the things that was talked about was specifically some of the stuff we saw here about context, speed management, Division 0 part, and I mentioned that Paula Flores study as well. If you haven't seen it, it's great because it really goes into how many of these roads were built at a time period that did not reflect the current development. So we saw some of the highlights there, but that was a great meeting, the Louisville Roadways Committee meeting. So I believe we're off for July, but that's my report.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 2 committee reports. The first one for the Affordable Housing Board. The board did meet this morning, and the key takeaways were that the governor did finally issue his budget. The Stowski Trust did not get fully funded, only due to COVID and the governor's concerns for lack of funds, from the tax dollars and revenues. So I believe he slashed about 220 million from the 337 million from the budget. We don't know what the allocation will be for Hillsborough County, but since we're one of the 5 largest counties, in the state, we're going to see a significant amount of that money, but it hasn't been, fully fleshed out and allocated. There was also just briefly touching on the newsletter that went out for May, which is like the most recent newsletter. If you haven't had a chance to see it, I can, circulate it, but it did go through all of the affordable housing future year 20 projects, that we've, that have been funded year to date. So I would encourage everyone to, take a look at that. It's got a really great, diagram there, and it breaks everything out. The amount of dollars have been spent on, different categories. So that's my report for the AHAB. And then, hold on one second. For the Public Information Committee report, the call for entries for the 38th Annual Planning and Design Awards presented by AICA, which is our marketing partner, and the Tampa Bay Times, has been open. The early bird deadline for the entries is approaching, which is July 31st. And the entries are due by August 25th. Birthday, so that should be easy for everyone to remember. Our awards program is going to be scheduled to be held on Tuesday, October the 27th at the Strass Center. I would like to invite all of our commissioners to a brief virtual, meeting to discuss how we should, proceed with this year's award. Given, COVID, I don't know if we're, if it's going to be even a good idea to have people, congregating, all together like that. And because I think, if memory serves me correct, I was speaking with Lynn. I'm not sure if she's available. She could probably chime in a little bit and speak a little more intelligently than me on this. But last year, I think we had a little over like 255, attendees, and we were originally thinking we were going to have, or hoping to have, around 300 for this year, since the event has been growing. But with the current space and having to social distance, and even I think with trying to add in different areas into the Strass, I think we're going to be around 150 something participants, which then would put the event way into the negative. Unless we're able to, get, costs, cheaper. So we have had a positive budget, but that would exhaust all of our funds potentially. So we have that risk. So I think that it would be a good idea for everyone to, just get everyone's input, let's just make the, the best decision, that we can. And, so staff should be sending out, an invite for that, upcoming meeting sometime around August the 3rd. And that's my report.
Very good. And that looks like our last item on the agenda. So unless there's any more comments, I will remind everybody that we have a public hearing coming up at 5:30ish here, a couple minutes. So I will see everybody over on the other channel, and meeting is adjourned.